Well, I didn't watch my channel either, and if nobody's gonna join, I'm just gonna play this.
Wise words of Jacob Petrucci that he stole from someone else.
Wise
That
words.
Please do.
smart people learn from their mistakes, and wise people learn from other people's mistakes. So, there you go. Joseph,
Hello. I was
Uh,
summoned.
you're summoned.
Yeah. So apparently, RJ said there's a AI Jesus in the works with a Yosef operating system.
There isn't a Jesus in the works that has nothing to do with me, but there might be more than one.
And Gavin was saying if we had to vote, it would choose that we make AI based on Yosef.
Oh no,
Gavin.
no, no,
Because Yosef is better at loving people. So
Yeah.
What are they feeding this AI Jesus? Like,
no, the
Is
real
it-
one. I can send you. There's my friend actually does a podcast on this. I've been sending them to Gavin. So there's a couple different things going on. But yeah, there's a AI Jesus. It's actually a Catholic art project, I would say almost.
really?
It's hard to kind of explain. But it was installed in a church and answering questions and whatever. It was a temporary installation, and they were very clear that it was an art project and not like meant to be whatever. But they found that people still
Okay.
treated it something like a priest, like they wanted, but also like Jesus, right? They wanted to do it. They would come up with like answers for different things, and
Yeah.
or they would do confession or whatever. There was a lot of weird uses.
back in my day, we made little animals to go on the ark in Sunday school. We didn't make AI Jesus as an art project. So
Exactly.
call it what you want.
But yeah, so there's that. There's quite a bunch of different.
You're good to go. It's hard to name a thing in this lifetime that'll last me a lifetime, but I'll only need one internet.
100% fiber, powered by the speed of light. Switch now to Frontier Fiber, starting at $29.99 per month.
Things going on, honestly, in that world, or in the related worlds. But it's not so different. I mean, there was even, the first year I was in grad school, so like 2014, 15. I remember like coming across an article about some U.S. evangelical group that had like much more simple, but AI chatbots that were like missionizing airports, so that people could like ask questions about the Bible and whatever, and trying to spread the gospel. And that way they didn't have to have like people actually do it because they weren't a huge group.
Yeah, that's a little wild.
So yeah, it's been going on for a while. There's been weird questions. Usually it's been from Protestants. This is the first time I've really seen a Catholic project.
Yeah, leave the weirdness to us Protestants, man. We're the one that's meant to be doing experiments.
Exactly.
Hey, but somebody's got to do it right. Obviously, the Protestants won't get it right.
Well, like I said, trial and error. If 5,000 denominations have their own individual AI,
Yeah, I mean, you're actually honest. Let the Protestants make all the mistakes, and then the Catholics can say, "Well, this was the best."
That's the wise way to go. Right?
oh, that's what they did at Vatican II. I don't know nothing about it. I just know it's a funny joke. It's a funny meme on the internet. Don't come at me.
No, that's actually true, right? It's not a meme. It's not a funny meme. It's the way to do it. Hey, Joseph, there's also mention of the synthetic person installed in teddy bears, and in which Tayo had mentioned. We mentioned Vervaeke, and Tayo said he admitted his inability to explain kind of maybe what Vervaeke's thoughts could be on how these AI could be treated like children and grow to become better versions of ourselves, so better loving, better at wisdom, things like that. Are you aware of any of his thoughts on how that would happen?
So I mean, there's an interesting kind of tiny. It's a very small subfield within AI that does stuff like this.
It does what?
There's a couple models, but the model that this sounds like is one that actually was weirdly enough initially created in South Korean prison guard robots.
Jules, what's up?
Nothing much. What's going on, man?
How you doing?
Doing all right yourself?
How are things in Louisiana?
Mostly I've just been busy with schoolwork.
Data analysis, right?
Yeah, that's what the master's program is. My desktop is what has like all my. I use Visual Studio Code and I run SQL on that, so that's where I do most of my work on. So it doesn't have like a camera or anything like that.
How could
I'd have to pull out like my laptop, and it would be kind of a hassle.
How could you possibly not have a camera? It's crazy.
Yeah, I know, right? Says a lot.
So what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, nothing much. So far, I mean, I haven't really been keeping up a whole lot with the TLC stuff. Sometimes I'll kind of like tune in.
Honestly, I haven't been keeping up that much with the TLC stuff either, partially because as things progress, I've been doing fewer and fewer TLC things. And eventually, I think I am going to one of these days have to kind of make a clean break, but I'm not the type of person so I still have friends from when I was 12. And the reason I don't have friends from before I was 12 is I came to the United States when I was like 8 and didn't really speak English.
Yeah.
Right? So like Michael,
Howdy.
how are you doing, sir?
Oh, pretty good. There's the work's gotten real busy. I haven't been able to give as much time to the corner website, the project thing. And I
Have you been playing around with Grok 3?
a little bit. Yeah.
Grok 3 is something I didn't realize. I had upgraded my X account, and I looked at the price of X for the account that I have. I'm like, I signed up for that, and I went and looked up. And I'm like, oh no! You bought a much discounted X before that. I was wondering why. Like I'm getting like, yeah, I'm at the point where I might even eventually want to decide to if Grok 3 is only going to be for like this expensive account, I'm just glad I have my expensive account. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I feel that.
I would say the Grok app is pretty good. I've been enjoying the beta.
I have to say Grok 3 is so much better than any AI I have used previously. And that's what reminded me when you said the TLC stuff. Yeah.
So I'm chomping at the bit to talk about the Ukraine-Russian stuff.
Okay.
Apparently something happened today with the Zelensky meeting.
Well, yeah, I saw Trump and JD Vance. They were kind of chewing out Zelensky, right?
It was mildly contentious. And then Trump releases one of his truths, whatever. And he's like, he's not serious. He can come back when he's actually ready for peace. Like pretty heavy statements across the board here. And again, you think about ARC taking place. You think about the stuff that the UK folks are in the middle of, right? And yeah, they've got problems in-house, like both free speech problems, major immigration problems, but it's more than that. There's an existential crisis about Russia, right? In a couple different ways. You can think about it in a couple different ways, but those folks, like they really have to. They're fragmented all over the place, and bindings have to happen. Bindings are going to happen, and now it's just like a battle of cults, right? That's what that is, and so ARC represents like an umbrella cult to try to build culture of the kind of people who, frankly, would be ready to make peace with Russia. And so that's part of what I see playing out here.
You think ARC? Interesting. That puts a much longer frame on both ARC and the entire Russia situation than I have been looking at it. I keep on flashing back to Obama saying to Romney, the 80s called and they want your foreign policy back.
Yeah. So again, I was on the CBAX stream there. I was like, okay, well, who's not there? Who's not at ARC? Well, I'll tell you what. People who don't want to make peace or who couldn't possibly conceive of making peace with Russia, those people aren't at ARC.
David Brooks was there.
Who I think is squishier. I think he's squishier than
Oh, he was there as the New York Times ambassador to the troglodytes. Yeah, that was his job.
right.
He's the New York Times ambassador to the troglodytes.
Yeah. And look, I think David Brooks, gun to his head, would be more reticent to make peace with a Christian-ish country than a totalitarian communist one.
I think David Brooks, gun to his head, would do anything and everything you tell him to.
That's true.
Like this is not somebody I have ever even imagined has actual principles. Which is what gets me, is that people talk about him being principled. I would be not at all surprised if David Brooks gets fired from the New York Times and then proclaims he was always MAGA and he just couldn't say anything because of it, because obviously that would be his only way of actually getting a job now.
So what Mark said something in here. He's like, no one important was at ARC. But I think I agree with that in a lot of ways, but I also go, all right, it's not like those people don't have any impact either, though, right? So then there's a bubbling up that at least happens that moves the nose of the ship.
It's this binary thing of zero power, all the power. And it's like, no, there's nobody who has all the power. And this is one of my disagreements with Grim Grizz. He thinks Peter Thiel is everything, and like Peter Thiel runs the world. And it's like, no, Peter Thiel doesn't run the world. Right. The fact is that there's no individual or even group of people who run the world. That's not how things work.
No, I mean it's
I don't know. There's people who run worlds, they own their own little pockets, and they have disproportionate power within a sector, but you're never going to have this all-encompassing Illuminati.
And even people who control, whatever they control, right? Like, the ecumenical patriarch, Pope, not Pope, Patriarch Bartholomew, right? He has a lot of influence, kind of, somewhat, in some ways.
Some ways.
And
mostly consigned to American Greece.
And mostly consigned to whatever the CIA tells him he's allowed to do.
Oh yeah, that's the America part.
When they're not busy with their furry chats.
That's the other thing. When they were talking about people who are very conservative, and I don't know how much you guys follow Tracing Woodgrains. I had him on my channel. He's a very interesting guy who was Mormon, and then only as an adult finally realized he was gay. And it's like,
okay,
you didn't know you were gay until after you stopped being Mormon. And like, he's not, I hate to say this, and I hope this doesn't get back to him, he's actually not gay. He's just that bought into being a supposed rationalist in that rationalist way where, well, why wouldn't I have sex with men?
That is where most Enlightenment philosophy leads anyway. So
there is definitely I forget who it was. So somebody said on Twitter, the way you understand the far left and the far right is the far right are gay men pretending to be straight, and the far left are straight men pretending to be gay. And it's so true.
So, man, I don't even know what to make of that stuff anymore.
I think Milo Yiannopoulos is the only exception to the rule. But
so, there's people who don't even buy into the language that is being used for any of that, right?
What do you mean?
Like the terminology, how it applies. This is why, like you got trans folks who are like, they don't want us to exist. right? But that same argument bubbles up all the way through the LGB also, right? Like you get in super trad communities and they go, you know, that language and that framing and that naming of that thing is something that we actually won't do, right? So and that's part of the tension of about. And look, you got like ARC, okay, just to kind of bring this back. There are little bubbles, right? And there's framing and language that they'll use where they do not agree at all, right? But there's also still sort of a weird uniting banner, right? And I don't know that we can say who's not there, right? And that's the best way to define it. But we're I think we're sort of like allies because we have to be, because the alternative is worse with all of this.
I don't know what the news is that I'm supposedly missing. I'm guessing you're talking about the Ukraine stuff.
It's big.
We are MAGA is going to have to split eventually. It will split once the current regime is over.
What do you think?
The current regime is really like, it seems very clearly that it's dying. And my biggest, the most clear way that I have seen that is when Ezra Klein on his most recent podcast had an unironic Trump supporter on, and rather than constantly pushing back at him, he was trying to make what the guy was saying comprehensible to his own audience. That was shocking. Ukraine was done 3 years ago. Like this is what I don't get what people don't understand.
Well, it's not really about Ukraine though, right? It's about continuing to dump money and
Old
keep
munitions, yeah.
Like here's a flag that has to stay up, and here's a party line to accept here. So to challenge that and to take that down, I mean, there's probably at least maybe a good 25% of, I'm just going to say, Americans who are still sort of like, no, we have to support democracy in Ukraine, right? Like they're probably still championing that line. And
3-hour Elon Musk Joe Rogan interview just dropped.
Yeah, I'm curious about
that. Were you listening when I was talking about how the cathedral media, like our supposed red-pilled media, is all very parasitic on the cathedral media? The cathedral media has lost its bearing, and so the red pill media has also completely lost its bearing.
Okay, so that's interesting, and I've heard you say something about that. Even like going as far as to loop like the breaking points people into that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like when they were talking about what's going on with Israel and Syria, they were just completely clueless as to what's going on in Syria and with Israel. Like there's really important things to be talked about. It feels like all of that is we talked Orthodox Boomer Grandma. One of these days you're gonna have to jump on. I've been wanting to talk to you for like a year now. We have been talking for a while about this curious moment that Vervaeke talks about, where things are so disoriented. Things are changing so quickly that individuals can have a lot of influence, and very much talking about how, Luther during the time of the Reformation, it was right when the printing press was just, and the Columbian Exchange, and how this is a realignment and a change similar to that.
Right.
Over the past month, I have felt that most especially.
Yeah, agreed.
And I thought that we were paddling to catch that wave. I thought I was paddling to catch that wave. That's why when Luke, the other Luke, on Christian Baxter's stream said, Ark is definitely not the future. I wanted to hear what he meant by that. And it seemed to me the only thing he meant by that was, they're not doing what I wanted them to do, which is be dissident right. It's like, yeah, they're not going to, the dissident right, like, this is another thing. People are suddenly claiming that Curtis Yarvin is very influential. And it's like, Curtis Yarvin just spent the past month saying he was wrong about everything he said.
More or less.
and that's me giving him credit, because for much longer than that, I had constantly said Curtis Yarvin doesn't know what he's talking about. Lots of people were like, you think you know better than Curtis Yarvin. And like now Curtis Yarvin's like, yeah, I was wrong about everything I said.
So here's what I get out of Yarvin, and I've been paying pretty close attention to him for at least 3 years now. Is the Trump administration is way more aggressive than he thought they were going to be. And they're not doing it the way that he would do it, and that he's curious how it'll turn out. That's the long and the short of it.
I mean, I'm sure you've heard me say this before. He's a dialectical materialist. He believes he believes that he can look at history and predict the future. And that just is so dumb to me.
Well, so like, of course it is. And the last time I went to the gas station, I know that I was able to get gas there. So I will try to drive that same path again and do it the same way. Right.
Right. Yeah. No. Okay. So yes, there are, it's this determinism, right? So there is a level of holding things loosely. There's a level of recognizing, yeah, I expect the sun to come up tomorrow. I realize that the sun could have exploded 8 minutes ago, and I would not know that right now,
Right.
because it's 8 light minutes away.
Right.
And having a confidence interval on things, which unfortunately, even people who have taken statistics oftentimes don't recognize what a confidence interval is. I remember talking to a friend of mine who has a PhD in neuroscience from one of the top universities in the world. And I kept on bringing up confidence intervals. And he said, I don't know what a confidence interval is. Am I really stupid? And I'm like, no, you're not stupid at all. You're a very, very smart guy. And he is a very, very smart guy. It's just that your PhD program completely failed you.
Yeah. Because, I mean, God, that's the thing, though. Like, man makes plans, God laughs. Because we had the similar thing with, what was it, Alan Lichtman, where he kept saying, like, oh, I have the keys to the White House. And he claimed that he predicted this coming election that it was going to be Kamala Harris who won with almost absolute certainty. And then you can watch the live stream.
The keys guy. Oh, my God.
Yeah, the keys guy. You can watch his live stream. You can just watch, he just goes pale when he finds out that he was just completely and utterly wrong.
So,
Oh, did you guys listen to Justin's latest? Not his latest, his previous music video, which went. I'm Rokor online, but not in my parish. Did you
Oh, I
guys
think
saw
I
it?
think I heard that one. Yeah.
the Archangels people did it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
It's really funny. Yeah, there's definitely a few of those out there, to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Honestly, they could be putting their time on and attention on a lot of things. That's a better thing for them to put their attention on than a lot of alternatives. So
It's hard to say. I mean, I worry more about Prelist. Like, there's a lot of these guys who think like, oh, I read, some like theological ambiguum in my spare time. That means I'm an authority. That's the real danger.
hey, within the Orthodox circles, I've been in the Orthodox Church for 2.5 years now, I think.
Yeah.
They come in.
It's coming around 4 years for me. This pasta.
Great. So, they'll stumble in. I'm sure you've seen it, right? They'll stumble in and they've got a whole bunch of head knowledge stuff, and their heart has to get tempered, right?
Yeah.
And they do that by just showing up. They got to be there at coffee hour, and they got to endure annoying people, and then hear people who have no idea what they're talking about, and like chill out, and learn how to like serve some food to a grandma.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I mean,
I'm all about it.
The way I view it is that, I mean, unless you spend some time, you've been like cleaning toilets, you really serve your parish community. You don't really have a right to say much.
No, but a bunch of fanboys, who eventually might finally get their butt into. Like, it's like, look, if they're obsessed with that for years, at some point they're going to be like, I've really got to walk in someday. I'm all about it.
It depends. I think there are people. It depends on the individual, because I have seen political converts. Usually it's been at another parish that I've seen, and sometimes those guys will come in for a little while. They'll realize that the faith isn't what it's cracked up to be, at least what they had in their head, and then they're going to go on to whatever random Vagantis group. They'll go SSPX or some kind of niche Anglican hyper conservative circle.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's okay. Like,
well, yeah, I'm just saying that it's harmful to them.
Yeah. Well, look, they're not going to stop doing those kind of things. People are always going to find some path to that. But let's say, there's, a few thousand guys out there, and maybe half of them are going to end up bound to a meaningful community, participating with an ecclesia, actually, sharing in Eucharist together. Great, right?
Yeah, I think we all come to the church for bad reasons. It's just you have to be molded by the community. I think that's important.
Jacob, I'm still itching to talk about Ukraine. So,
what do you want to say about Ukraine?
Well, here's the thing. It just like it feels like right now is the tipping point. I mean, all the rumbling that anybody with a hint of schizo in them, right, has felt of like a world war thing coming. It's like right now is the tipping point. Right now, like what just happened in the White House is like, is that going to happen or isn't it? There's a lot of people working on it all at once, right? And there's better people that are in the middle of it, trying to create some sort of peace. And I don't know. Like it feels heavy. It feels real heavy.
Also, I think the big thing with Ukraine and Russia discourse is, I mean, everyone wants to like pick a side, like, oh, I'm on Putin's side, oh, I'm on Zelensky's side. We could just have a third alternative where we just recognize that this is a horrible situation. There's no good side, and that the war, ideally, as many people as humanly possible should work towards resolving this bloodbath.
Well, so let's say Mark's right. assuming he's talking about Zelensky being the baby that's throwing the tantrum. If he's talking about Zelensky, I totally agree. But Zelensky's sort of a figurehead of this larger globalist initiative, and he's
Hold on, it's not just a globalist initiative.
Yeah, sure.
He has supporters in Ukraine.
Yeah. I agree with that. I agree. They're totally caught up by that swarm, right? We're all in some kind of binding or swarm of some kind, right? So he is the Godhead voice of this swarm, and that swarm is throwing a tantrum because Trump could not care less about the situation. He's like, I don't have any interest in this, but I don't like the implications if it gets worse, right? So like, and then my immediate predecessor, like, I got to deal with his baggage, and we're sending you guys a bunch of money, and you got a bunch of our equipment. So I'm trying to get a good deal out of this. I'm trying to get you all to stop killing each other, for God's sake. And Trump, son of a bitch, might come out on the other side of this as like an amazing peacemaker, or Europe gets ravaged. I don't know.
So Putin is an imperialist. Erdogan is an imperialist. Mohammed bin Salman is an imperialist. Xi is an imperialist. Trump is an imperialist. The question becomes, will they peacefully divide parts of the world up together? I can totally see Trump throwing Taiwan under the bus. That's the part that I'm like, eek, right?
What
Mohammed
does that look like, though? What does that look like?
just let China have Taiwan.
And then what?
In favor of better trade deals, or
What happens
such
to
and such.
what happens to the Taiwanese people as a result of that?
The same thing that's happened in Hong Kong.
How bad is that? I don't know enough.
The people in Hong Kong hate it. The people in Taiwan will hate it. They're a very small number of people. I mean, MBS seems to be doing the exact same thing with the Palestinians. We are in a time of conquerors, and there are people like.
So what are the implications there? It's like you let
Conan the Barbarian.
Do they go to Japan afterwards or something? I mean, like, what are we talking about here?
I'm not even sure China wants. No, China wants one China. China wants China to be reunified.
Yeah.
It's possible they may look when people get what they want, they start thinking of something else that they want. The guys, all of you have wrenches. You could have banned the guy before I did. It's so funny. Like almost everybody in my chat has a wrench. Somebody comes in, is spamming the chat, and everybody's like, "Oh, thank you for like." Come on, you all have wrenches.
I don't even get what he was trying to do with that comment, but whatever.
Yeah, at first I was like wondering, and then it was like the same comment over and over again. It's like, look, when people get what they want, they may then want more. I don't know if he gets Taiwan, suddenly wants basically all of the Eastern Asia, including possibly China, Japan.
So I feel like John Mearsheimer. I'm sure I'm saying
Mearsheimer, yeah.
Mearsheimer. I feel like he would say something like, "No, it's right next to it, right? Like, what are you going to do?" Really?
Mearsheimer is not. I mean, honestly, the guy is just he's not as principled as too many people think he is.
And that's okay, but I could hear him saying like, just let Taiwan go. Like you can only do so much about that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Japan seems impractical. It seems like it would start like another like world war.
Well, we also have a whole bunch of bases there still and everything, you know. Like
That's my point. Like
yeah,
it wouldn't make sense for them to go for Japan.
Well,
Taiwan makes absolute sense.
Adam brings up a really good point. As
Yeah.
long as Taiwan is making all of our chips, yeah, we're not going to allow it. But guess what? Unlike what all the other administrations did, which is say Taiwan has our chips and therefore we're going to defend it, I think Trump would be like, well, why aren't we making our own chips?
Yeah. There's no way that we're not in the middle of seriously dealing with that issue and have been for the last 4 years, right? Like there's people that have got to be like getting really, really serious about that. If there's not, I mean, mind blown. So like, you know, yeah, okay, we're back into a multipolar world, right? Like we're already there. That's done. Already happened, right? And Europe doesn't have any meaningful power. Neither does anything in Africa and the entire continent. Don't care about Australia. It's really just Russia, China, and the U.S., right? So we're no longer post-Soviet collapse where the last one's left. That's not the situation anymore, right? So it's like, are you going to buddy up with communists who do not share anything resembling your values? Or are you going to make friends with the Russian weirdos who have a different brand of Christianity and just came off of being communism? Right. And that's the crossroads. And I think that the vote for Trump was effectively squeaking out a majority about what we should do there.
I don't know. It looks like Trump is leaning towards isolationism at this point. Besides some of the weird comments he made about making
It's
Gaza
not
into real estate.
isolationism when you want to take over the whole continent. That's not isolationism. I think he's an imperialist.
Yeah.
I think he wants to see the Gulf of America. Look, I have wanted Canada and the United States to quasi-unify since I was in junior high school. I just would look at that, like I would look at Alaska, I would look at the United States and be like, why is there a disconnect here, right? Again, I keep on going back to like Conan the Barbarian, a bunch of guys deciding to cut up the world between them, and that seems what's going on.
Yeah.
Is a bunch of guys are just deciding to cut up the world between them. And the weird thing about it is it involves less bloodshed than how the world has been with our supposed new global world order of peace, because 1 million people have died in the Ukraine-Russia war. And we could keep it going and more people would die.
Yeah.
Many people, I don't know the exact numbers, but many, certainly tens of thousands of people have died in continuing the Palestinian problem, in the Syrian civil war, in Lebanon, right? And Mohammed bin Salman being the king of Arabia in a very real sense over all of Arabia might actually end up being more peaceful and fewer people dying.
So that's what I'm for regardless, but I don't trust the only way I think that happens is if the MAGA right, let's say, and the coalition that represents, right, which is basically a spectrum from Vance to Trump, which is a very wide spectrum.
Yeah.
they have to ally with Russia. That is the closest thing to a peaceful situation for the next 50 years that we've got. I think so.
Guy, it is great to see you again. It's been a very long time since I've seen you. I would love to hear what you are thinking. I am wondering what your comment is referring to. It would be nice if there was more sense making going on. Like, I want to sit there and listen to insightful, smart people talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, at least this is happening pretty transparently in comparison.
Yeah, there's a lot more. There's a lot of primary information available.
Yeah.
But all of the secondary information available is shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's disconnected from the primary information that we can get off X.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it's also filtered through ideology. So it's hard to really find who's actually being honest with you.
Well, as soon as you think someone's actually honest with you, it just means it aligns with your ideology. There's no escaping that.
So part of this comes from, and I've been talking about this for a very long time. We have been bucking propositional tyranny.
Yeah.
Which we should. Propositional tyranny is silly and stupid. But when ideologies are divorced from propositions, they are even sillier and stupider.
Okay.
And what used to be the case was there was enough alignment between ideology and propositions that you could apply your ideological spectrum, right? You could view the world through your ideology and see a map that wasn't completely ridiculous. Now, because the underlying facts have changed so much, there are a bunch of ideological positions out there which are so clearly antithetical to the propositions. Look, is sex binary? Obviously, sex is binary. The only way you can reproduce is with a male and a female gamete, right? There are women, there are men.
Right. But even the language you're using about that puts you within a certain ideology, or I don't even like using that
framework, a theology, really.
Yeah.
A frame, really. I mean, in the Jungian sense, a theology.
And you basically won't trust anybody who can't at least express that.
Right.
Right.
At the same time, like, one of the things I haven't liked is that doesn't mean there aren't intersex people. That doesn't mean there aren't people who are who aren't going to reproduce, who aren't part of our society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And that ideological tenor. Sorry, I'm getting texts at the same time. Oops, I didn't realize my StreamYard link wasn't available for everyone. What was I saying? Yoav, rescue me from my old brain.
No can do. The link is still up there at the very top of the conversation. Never mind. Okay, so since you're stuck, I'll insert my comment. there was always a multiplayer world. What is happening is a great player has been exiting, and that is Europe. And whoever backed Ukraine was not America but Europe. Never mind what Biden was doing; it's insignificant. I mean, you cannot call it America.
Right.
It was another player. For the Middle East, it leaves a problem because if you have three players, America, Russia, and China, Middle East is just in the middle.
Yes.
It's not very clear whose territory it is.
Yeah.
When Europe was a player, then it was their territory, undoubtedly. And then the 1956 happened. And thereabout, maybe 1 year later, I don't remember, the Egyptians seized the Suez Canal from the European. And the European wanted and could take it back. And then the American intervened and stopped the European from taking back the Suez Canal. And that was the year that Europe started to exit the stage. I mean, these things take time. And this year is the last year of the process of Europe exiting the stage. As a Zionist, my version, and you can, that's my narrative, you can, that's my opinion. There was no Palestinian problem before 1956. There was a humanitarian problem. And there were was an Arab population in the area that is called Palestine, but there was no Palestinian problem. The Palestinian problem emerged shortly after the European exited the stage. One could say, I mean, it has many faceted, many players. One may suspect that it was an attempt from the European to stay somehow have a hand in the game. And then possibly according to this strange theory of mine, if Europe exits and Europe disappears from the stage, the Palestinian problem will disappear, and of course the humanitarian problem, people will not disappear. The humanitarian problem will remain, but it will not be narrated as such. That was my comment. And about the Ukraine, yes, I would love to have a conversation with you, Michael, about Ukraine, and I think I know a lot about it, but I won't.
Why won't you?
Because 10% of the population of my country are originally Russian speakers. Some of them from the Ukraine, some of them from Russia. Those coming from Russia don't necessarily love Russia very much, and they are here. There is no censor holding me, but possibly lost friendships.
So what I see happening in the Middle East, and I've been trying to pay really close attention to what's going on in Syria. My parish is made up of a handful of Syrians, and what I see is another little microcosm happening in parallel to all of this, right? Where the large players seem to be Turkey, Saudi, Iran, and Israel, right? And context on their relationships respectively with each of these countries. It's almost like you can watch some of the multipolar, the larger multipolar players.
Just a second, Guy. Your mic is really loud. If you can mute yourself when you're not talking, that would be great.
So just watching those larger powers sort of put pressure and on those Middle Eastern countries, right, and those powers, and watching them interact together, is part of this story, because that, in a way, that's partially how some of the communications about what's going to happen is going on. That's how I see it.
Guy, I have been waiting to hear from you because you are a smart guy who understands things a lot better than most people, and I trust your opinion.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's smart. I'm not sure my opinions are that trustworthy. I think the real difficulty is that the guarantees that we've had for 80 years under NATO and under the peace that was created seem to be evaporating very quickly. We can't trust America anymore from the European side. Your president has basically sided with the enemy. Who knows what that will mean? We are capable of responding, I think, in a longer term picture, but it'll take 2 or 3 years to do that. And Putin is just going to love it. He's going to absolutely love it. He's just sitting there rubbing his hands thinking, great, Ukraine's mine. Hey, Lithuania, Moldova, whoever else.
Finland, most likely.
Yeah, the Finns were part of the Russian Empire, weren't they? Yeah, so obviously they're sort of really part of the Russosphere, obviously, on that level. Yeah, we just can't trust it.
So what do you think that looks like? Like what's happened to Ukraine is one thing. The position that I seem to see these days is like there's a lot of antagonism. There's a lot of pressuring from like globalist Western powers and like really poking Putin. And I do tend to subscribe to that. But I think that with these other countries, it would be more annexation. Is that the word that I want to use?
Mm-hmm. Annexation.
Yeah. So I would see that as the case, and that wouldn't be the worst scenario when you're thinking about a more complicated multipolar tension.
So I think, first of all, we haven't seen or allowed in the world's diplomacy any movement of borders, really, for the last 80 years. So even Kaliningrad, they could have walked into Kaliningrad any time they wanted to in the recent past, either the Lithuanians or the Poles, and they've chosen not to. Because basically the world order says we stick at one place. We stick on the borders we've got. Putin doesn't believe that, does he?
No.
And therefore we have isolation.
Trump doesn't believe that.
And exactly. The real problem is that Trump doesn't believe that. Everything is a deal. And often a bad one.
I have to say, though, one of the things with the special relationship, I think Britain can rely on the special relationship. The rest of Europe cannot.
No. I think everyone was a bit surprised by the way Trump treated Starmer this week. Starmer came along with a really nice present, i.e. come and see the king.
We're
Starmer. Keir Starmer saying we have free speech, I found laughable.
Yeah. See, I don't find that laughable. I don't see where we don't have free speech.
That's okay. That's sort of the consensus that's been built here, and part of that is the Tommy Robinson stuff. It's watching certain kind of censors, a certain kind of Christian censorship that's been happening.
Count Dankula was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
You know the Count Dankula story guy?
No, don't know what
Yeah,
you're
we tried
talking
his
See, this is
pug
the
to do
thing.
a salute.
It's bigger here in the United States than it was actually in Great Britain, and the fact is that we've counted that as the British not recognizing what's going on under their own thing. So Count Dankula, Marcus Meacham, I think his name is, was a Scottish comedian YouTuber, and he made a video which was quite clearly very comical and funny, where he taught his wife his girlfriend's pug to Zig Heil on command.
Okay.
He would say Jew, and the puppy would raise its arm, which I thought was hilarious. Lots of people thought was hilarious. He was prosecuted in a court in Scotland for that, fined £500, and this became an international sensation everywhere but Great Britain.
You can't name a child Adolf in Germany either.
Well, first of
We're
all,
very sensitive about that. We really are.
Well, I mean, this is another thing. I have been for a very long time. I remember about 8 years ago, there was a production in Germany of The Producers, which was called off because of the Nazi stuff. And like, when you can't make fun of Nazis, that's
yeah. The Tommy Robinson thing is just people deliberately misunderstanding who Tommy Robinson is. He's just a nasty piece of work, just generally, and has deliberately caused it. So he wasn't caught on a free speech thing. Interestingly enough, he did some violence and was told that he couldn't report what was going on inside the court, which is the standard British legal thing. And then he stood outside the court and said what had happened. So the judge called him back in and put him in jail for it, for contempt, not for free speech, but for contempt.
I think a lot of
disobeying what a judge says.
He's
nasty.
A lot of Americans look at him and they see themselves more in him than the people who say that he's nasty.
Yeah, because they don't really understand the situation.
Well, you could say that, or they're right, and that you would say that those people are pieces of work. That's very possible. And so there's a weird alliance that's sort of starting to happen that I'm watching play out, which is like, okay,
yeah, and then you start believing that Ukraine invaded Russia first, and Putin was quite right to come back. I mean, that's the difficulty, that there's just all these little things.
Yeah, so we do.
I kind of lean towards Guy's side on the Tommy Robinson stuff, in the sense that I don't think Tommy is a trustworthy figure at all, especially he gets a lot of weird race stuff.
The guy's a provocateur. He's making him his money. He is a nasty piece of work. But the fact is, I don't think most Americans care.
No. But do they care about truth? Because that's the difficulty in underlying these things is how much truth is there.
Okay, so this is the thing, Guy. So let's talk about Trump saying he should have never started it. I keep on hearing that clip and people playing that clip constantly. And hearing Donald Trump saying that Ukraine started the war, right? And I hear Donald Trump speaking the way Americans do when they say, "Don't start shit and there won't be no shit," which is a very, very different thing from saying that. And we're not communicating. We're talking in different worlds.
Yeah, and that window is narrowing more and more. Right. These little circles that we're in are like will probably be one of the last holdouts of Windows.
And I'm not sure this holdout is actually holding out.
Right. Oh well, I mean, it ultimately can't. Right. Like it's all coming to a head where you go, okay, like having lived on both sides of this in the not so distant past, right? I'm like, yeah, I know why you have that perspective. I know why my dad has his perspective. Like I understand, like I see both sides. I know where I'm sitting, and the Trump Vance thing seems to be a handout going, look, if you are some kind of Judeo-Christian-y kind of thing, kind of capitalist-y, right? We're probably and not woke, right? If you're good with those three things, we can probably figure it out.
Jan God, I'm wondering what. First of all, Jan God lives in London, so
Yes. The answer is yes.
Obviously, I don't see how this is a question. Obviously, he is, but
Yeah,
what
but
does that mean? Does that mean we're going to put him on trial and hang him?
So's George W. Bush. So's Dick Cheney. I was out.
Oh, I thought you lived in London. Where in Britain? You do live in Britain, don't you? I'm pretty sure you live in Britain, Jan God. Guy is also British. You may have noticed. Guy, what have you been paying attention to lately? Because I haven't seen you for a while.
Just a second to continue the narrative about the Ukraine. I have a question for Guy. In your world, did the Russian kidnapped about 20,000 children from the Ukraine and brought them to Russia?
I have heard that. I couldn't verify it. It wouldn't surprise me. Is that a fair answer?
Yoav turned off his video.
No, it's a fair answer. Just I want to know.
I
what
can't
people
verify
think.
it. I don't know. I don't
Well,
know.
neither can I. I just wanted to know where you stand with it. If you don't,
But it
then
wouldn't
don't do it.
surprise me.
Fine.
It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Thanks. Then that's all I want to know.
There are reports of the Russians shooting prisoners of war as well, which is, reasonably unverifiable. Though torturing prisoners of war seems to be fairly standard, and I was warned about that back in the 80s, so that wouldn't surprise me either.
Have you heard of the Nazi battalions of Ukrainians?
Yeah, I've heard of the Azov
Azov.
and people like that.
You're muted, Michael.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. Most of the crimes that we could talk about that have gone on, you could apply to Americans in the Iraq War.
Probably, possibly, and the Brits there probably too in Basra.
Yeah. So, like,
war is ugly, and the idea of a war criminal. I mean, I'm kind of happy we kind of came up with it after World War II, and we had the Nuremberg. Like, it was cute. This idea of international law, like it sounds nice. I don't understand how you take 18-year-old boys, train them to go kill people and break things, and then find yourself. And this is one of the reasons I was actually very happy about Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. If you know his story, and frankly, the New York Times did a great daily on. I was surprised at how humanizing they were of Pete Hegseth. Where
He's ex-Marine, isn't he?
Yeah, and so you have to understand he went to Princeton, which is Princeton undergrad is where the top of the top of the top of Americans go, and he went to Princeton undergrad. He was in ROTC, I believe.
Yeah,
and
I believe so.
He was a junior officer in Guantanamo, and then he was a junior officer. It was either Afghanistan or Iraq, where he looked at the rules of engagement, he said, "There's no way my men are going to be able to follow all these rules," and so he would lead the searches himself, because he's like, I can't give an 18-year-old this rule book and tell him shoot this and don't shoot that.
Yeah.
Right. And there's all kinds of realignment going on, much of which I am very happy about, much of which scares me incredibly. And this is why I want to listen to Guy, and I want, and I mean, Guy is maybe one of the first people. You may be the first person I interviewed on this channel, Guy. I think it might actually be. And
it seems like a long time ago, Jake. It seems, but it's probably it's more recent than that.
It's been like 4 years, 3 or 4 years. Which channels are have you been watching, like PVK? Have you been following? Have you been following any of them?
Interesting. I met PVK in London this week.
Very nice.
And we actually sat down and had quite a good conversation.
You didn't go to ARC, did you?
No, I wouldn't have. I firstly couldn't have, because I didn't have that much money before for the initial cost, and B, my work at the moment is very busy. And I have other things, another job behind that in local. I'm a town councillor in American terms.
Yes.
And my council is in so much rubbish that you would never believe it. We owe $3 billion on 100,000 people.
How did you end up owing $3 billion?
Because the previous Conservative group just kept borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and then COVID happened, so they had to borrow some more. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Wow.
And now I'm a Liberal Democrat, so I'm from the moderate sort of centrist group, and we're taken over, and it's just trying to rebuild the place again and trying to say to people that actually we're never going to pay that money back.
Would you be willing to stand for MP?
No, we have a great MP. I don't need to stand. I'm too old as well. You need to be in your 30s, 40s to do first generation sort of MPing.
You think so?
Yeah, and then you can have being an MP in the UK is a career. It's not something you do just randomly. It's not something you do just for one time.
I think that might change, especially in the next election. That's why, like,
it already has in this last election. I mean, something like I think something like 50% or more of the MPs are first timers this time around.
Do you follow Sargon of Akkad? And the Lotus Eaters podcast and all that stuff?
No, I'm really quite out of this space, to be honest. I just don't have time to be in it, and I understand where Paul is, but I haven't followed that trajectory for the last 2 years, really.
I have to say, I think Carl Benjamin, also known as Sargon of Akkad, while he's better known in the United States, as far as I understand, than he is in Great Britain.
Yeah.
I think he may become a much more important figure than certainly a lot of people would want. Funny enough, I could see him in the House of Lords in not so long from now. I could see him being appointed to the House of Lords.
Desperately to trim that place down.
If the reality TV stars have made their way to the top of the hierarchy, that means we're about 10 years behind of online influencers ending up there instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody in the previous stream said that it appears Europe, or maybe it was Jules in this stream, Europe appears to be 3 years behind the United States.
No, at least probably a decade on those sort of things. I mean, Alan Sugar hasn't yet become MP, the guy who runs The Apprentice here.
Yeah.
It is different over here. It is different over here. Very different feel. over here.
So here's
Uh,
here's what the new right, which I find myself in the midst of, anticipates for the UK and how they're seeing America in relation to it right now. So they're anticipating that likely the Reform Party grows quite a bit, gets enough from the conservatives, and that effectively what the US has done here in the last few months is where the UK will be in about 4 years, something like that.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's interesting that there's only one party that believes in proportional representation, and that's my Liberal Party. And we're actually the ones who probably would do worse out of it currently. Reform would really needs it, because the way the one party, the first past the post system works in our constituencies, they're never going to get above 25 people. I mean, the Liberal Party, when they had 25-30% of the vote, were still getting only 15 people in the Parliament.
How many people in Parliament?
600 odd.
Wow.
Yeah.
The House of Commons has
House of Commons. Yeah.
600 members.
How many in the House of Lords?
850 currently, but only about 250 or 300 of them are active.
And what party are you in, Guy?
I'm in the Liberal Democrats, so we're the middle party. We've got 72 currently. Yay!
Okay.
Biggest ever since 1926 for us.
So left of Tories, right of Labour?
Yeah, we're stuck in the middle
Okay.
somewhere.
Okay.
So we're a mix of the right wing of the Labour Party and the classic Liberals. It's interesting, the art conference you were talking about, Jacob. They talk about themselves being classic Liberals. To me, they're not. They're right wing Conservatives. And Philippa Stroud, sister in the Lord, everything else, but yeah, way to the right of where I am.
So I think that our general view is that even folks that you call conservative on your side are pretty far to the left.
Yeah, if you shift,
Yeah.
if you took the Republican
The Overton
Democrats
window?
and shifted them 50% that way, so to speak, to the left, you would get the British politics.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you as Americans extinguished the left wing sometime in the 1920s under Coolidge, when there was a march of veterans and lots of left-wing agitation in labor unions and things. And basically, the American state let private contractors and the police take out all those people and make sure they didn't have any power. They shut down all the left-wing papers that were around all over the place. So yeah.
Guy, how is the church doing in England?
Oh, both reasonably well for its own terms and terribly badly in overall terms.
What do you mean?
I think it's 5 to 8% population turn up to church on a Sunday, complete in utter, and that might
What
include the Muslims.
What age demographic? Like geriatric?
Oh, we're getting older and older. I mean, I'm one of the medium-age ones in church, and I'm 60s.
Okay. It's funny because you answered that exactly how my godfather, who was Episcopalian, and also he's a huge Anglophile, but he answered that exact same. He would have said the exact same thing.
What you've got, though, is the Justin Brierley stuff going on, and we are seeing a new group of younger people come through.
Yeah,
And
how do you feel about
that wave is just beginning to sort of take off, and we don't know whether it's going to go or up.
Yeah. How do
Billy
you feel
Graham
about
campaign
Calvin
coming next
Robinson?
year. Yeah,
Mask?
dear
That
Calvin,
guy?
brother in the Lord, I'm sure, but
I don't know. I think the
Not
Nazi
someone I would
salute
follow.
thing has kind of cemented him in, that kind of weird side.
He's said a lot of really stupid things, I think, especially recently. But it's the Anglo-Catholic alliance.
they're not going anywhere. So
Really?
no. So the church in the UK. And let me phrase it properly, because you've got the Church of England, who is the state church, and they're divided in three. There's a 25% Anglo-Catholic, maybe,
Okay.
There's about 10 to 15%, maybe 20% middle church who are just sort of like dying and not knowing what to do with themselves because they don't really have any function in one sense. They just exist because the church exists. And then you've got the evangelicals, and especially the charismatic evangelicals out of Holy Trinity Rompton and a whole load of other things. And they are taking over quietly. The most priests coming through the system come from that group. 89% of people who are going to run churches will come from that group.
See, when you say evangelical priests, like that in the United States, that's an oxymoron.
Yeah,
Like, is there a guy in a t-shirt? Or...
It's our guys throwing guitars and putting their hands up in the air. I am not an Anglican. I am a Baptist. Now, when I say that, I can just see the cultural misappropriation of that, because I'm definitely not Southern Baptist. The Baptists in the UK date back to Bunyan, and we date back a bit before that as well, but basically Bunyan. And
any continuity of Spurgeon?
Spurgeon was Baptist, yeah. So you've got that whole. It's a different. So you've got all the what they call non-denominational, non-denominational churches, and also the non-conformist. That's the word I was looking for. Non-conformist churches. We don't conform to the Church of England.
Well, here's what's interesting about that, right? And like you can see that huge difference between what an evangelical is in the UK versus the US. Same with Baptists, but just a few hundred years ago, basically you exported, or they left.
Yeah, we sent all our best over to your side.
Well, the most disagreeable people in the country are the ones who had to go.
The ones who are most faithful to the word of God, maybe.
Well, I mean,
I don't think you consider the Puritans faithful as a Baptist, though.
Yeah,
especially the fact that they became the Congregationalist and then Unitarian Universalist.
Well, that's of course,
but
afterwards they can't be, but yeah, you can't
judge. If they were higher in agreeableness, they probably just would have gone with the flow, right? So disagreeableness is largely like of all the little.
Yeah. Oh, I see you in personality type. Oh, yes, I can see what you mean. Yes, yes.
So we're like Americans.
Aren't Canadians Americans with loyalty?
No.
No, I'd argue that they're different things. Especially, there's a lot more French influence in Canada.
Oh, I recognize that. Sorry, that was just me being facetious. But that's
yeah, I know.
Right. But there's a point. Yes, I think you're right. The people who are willing to stand up for something are the ones who left.
What percentage of British people are actually Roman Catholic?
6, 7, 8, maybe. I mean,
from Irish or actual British Catholic.
So you got. But what's interesting is you got the Catholic Church, the Catholic school here, which my children went to, is now mostly immigrants, Poles, the other Eastern Europeans, Nigerians, other Africans, in background.
See.
As well as the Irish admix that came in.
We have this thing where we have a lot of our evangelicals who claim to be Christian nationalists and are talking about more Christian involvement in our government. Mm-hmm. And I keep on pointing out to them that if they were to do that, the Roman Catholics would outweigh them by far. And I'm just thinking King Charles is the head of your church. Right? I don't know where the church is going and where the Anglican church is going and where the Catholic church is going and where your society is going to be going. But this secularism that in the United States, it's definitely dying. And I think it's eventually going to die in Great Britain as well. And
secularism or the church, sorry.
No, secularism. This idea that you can have a secularity is definitely dying here. that you can like, when, let's put it this way, when Kash Patel, who is beloved by Republicans here in the United States, took his oath of office on the Bhagavad Gita, there was a stir. And
Why?
because we've gotten to a point where people are like,
Because
nah.
seriously, folks like me, not having it. Although I really like Kash Patel.
But he's a Hindu. What do you expect him to do?
This is not a secular country. This is a Christian country. That's our stance.
Okay.
I don't. That's
The
the
establishment
thing.
of
I don't even know
religion?
if I'm comfortable calling America a Christian
See, that's
country.
the thing.
Right.
There's this play on establishment of religion where I think a lot of them would be perfectly fine with me swearing in on just the Hebrew Bible, and
It's right on the
certainly a Protestant using a KJV or a Catholic using, with the
To
Apocrypha.
Jerusalem.
But like, once you're talking Bhagavad Gita, and certainly once you're talking Quran,
Yeah.
people are like,
Out of
yeah.
it.
I don't want to.
We're way past that. We're way past that. That's just nothing. That's nothing.
We
Yeah.
were too.
We were
too.
Yeah. I
30
was.
years ago, 30 years ago in the United States, someone who even lifted an eyebrow at a Bhagavad Gita would be considered anathema. And things have changed.
Yep.
We live in a very different world.
Yeah.
To you. We don't have the strong Christian nationalist thing. In fact, when someone said to me Christian nationalist for the first time, I heard it on a PDK thing. He just mentioned it in passing. It was like, I wonder what that is. What does that mean? I couldn't find a reference to it. It didn't have any resonance to me, interestingly enough.
See, the thing is, Guy, I think there's
because I'm the other side of the pond.
No. I think there's more of a groundswell where you are, which you are not seeing. What do you think of what's Spiked Media? Do you know what I'm talking about? Spiked Media is based in England. Why am I forgetting the name of the guy who runs it? I can see his face in front of me. Who am I thinking of? Michael, you know who I'm talking about. Spiked Media?
Someone look it up on Google.
I bet I'd know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
We should have a little one of these screens.
Brendan O'Neill. Brendan O'Neill.
Never heard of him.
I think it might be worth your time actually looking up Brendan O'Neill.
I'll have a look.
Brendan O'Neill I find to be brilliant. He's a avowed Marxist. He spends most of his time talking to the MAGA crowd, and he's beloved by the MAGA crowd.
Why? Because they're the opposite, aren't they? Or am I just
See, that's the thing. That's the thing. There's plenty of Marxists. I think what's the name of that Jewish woman? Batya Ungar-Sargon.
Yeah.
Again, Marxist. Most of the time, she's a huge Trump supporter now.
Yeah.
Has avowed Marxist. Spends most of her time talking to the. Things are shifting in incredible ways.
I mean, so I agree, Marxist, but I think most people would recognize it more as like a FDR progressive, right? That's probably a little bit more recognizable for people, even though I understand the Marxist underpinnings.
They call themselves Marxist, but what they mean is, I care about class. I care about the poor.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that makes up a whole lot of the Trump base. I remember. So a lot of the Occupy Wall Street folks, the Bernie supporters, I was with them. I was on the ground with those guys. And after what happened with the primary with Hillary and Bernie, so many of them became Trump supporters. It's not even funny.
This is the thing, and I was saying this earlier. People who call MAGA conservative misunderstand. There's nothing conservative about the Make America Great Again movement. You are more correct in calling it reactionary, although I don't think it's reactionary either. But the word conservative just does not fit.
We think of it as populist.
Populist, yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Definitely.
But the vibe shift is something people have been talking about a lot about in the United States since the election. There has been a breaking of the dam in certain ways, certainly here in the United States, that I think England is very ripe for. And when that dam breaks, I think the people who've been watching the BBC for the past for their news are going to be very, very shocked to see what happens in England.
Okay. I think it's different. I do think it's different over here. I think that I knock on a lot of doors as part of my political activity, and yeah, I'm not seeing what you're seeing, and I don't think even there are areas in the UK which are different. I know that. I mean, otherwise, dear old Nigel wouldn't be what he is today. But whether that's going to actually translate into change in society is a very good question. I don't think it is. I don't see it.
Do you talk to young voters very much?
Yeah, a lot.
Okay, because what was shocking and what changed in the
but
US
not in working class areas. So I live in a reasonably middle class area. And
Okay.
so most of the people I talk to are middle class.
And
But-
just to clarify, middle class, what you call middle class in England, in the United States, we refer to as upper class.
No.
Yes.
Our problem is that our middle class extends from the top of blue collar all the way up.
Right. You
What
guys
salary
have an
range?
aristocracy we don't have at all.
Well, we have an aristocracy, but
Yeah, we don't have that.
But I know people who are earning £250,000 a year, i.e., $600,000-700,000 a year, and think of themselves as middle class, whereas actually they're up, in any realistic terms, they're upper class. Once you start sending your kids to private school, you're upper class as far as I'm concerned.
Right. When people say the middle classes in England, they mean
Professional.
they mean people. Yes, but
Yeah.
when we talk about professionals, we mean the upper class.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say like middle class is usually what, around 65 to 120 is usually the cutoff.
120, yeah, 200 at the most.
But let's also be
Yeah.
clear. Anybody in the West that's in some sort of middle classy,
Almost, yes, I think in some ways, yeah.
it's like
Although having said that,
so
I
much
have a
better off than anybody.
I have what you call a project, which I always think is a great word. A working class estate. It's not a dump estate. That's further around the corner. But there is that group of people as well who are struggling on a day-to-day basis to actually feed themselves and their kids, to
So
actually get the basics of going.
we talk about the working poor, which is lower than the working classes, which is lower than the middle class.
Right. So we have a working class who stretch all the way from guys who are doing really quite well. And actually, it's not money. That's the other thing that you've got to recognize in the UK. It's about culture.
Yep.
It's not about money. There are guys who are working class but earning, the 600, the more than I am by a long way. But the working class are basically guys who are struggling in a. They're not professional. They probably haven't finished university. They probably haven't even been to university. And often most immigrants fall into that category as well. And then there are people on Social Security who are at the bottom of that grouping who are struggling to keep, the two ends of life together.
So back to what I was trying to bring out was we had a lot of people vote in this past election who used to not vote in the United States,
Right.
which is young men.
And the Amish.
And the Orthodox Jews.
Yes.
So one thing that did not happen, that almost happened, was the state of New Jersey, which is solid blue, almost went for Trump in this past election.
I find blue to me means conservative. I struggle with that one. Sorry about that.
Here, solid blue means solid.
It's the other way around in here.
It is. It is. So it is. It like if New Jersey had gone for Trump, it would have absolutely decimated our understanding of our own thing. Because so many Orthodox Jews live in New Jersey, and they showed up for Trump in ways that they never did before. It was a shocking thing.
Why do you think?
Oh,
because of Israel?
See,
because they're not Zionists, are they?
This is the funny thing. They're not Zionist, but they're also not like the anti-Semitism on the left here. And a similar thing happened with Labor under Corbyn, which is
Corbyn was toast very, very quickly.
Rabbi Mervis, as chief rabbi, really was when he came out and was like, "Yeah, no, Corbyn has to go." That made a huge impression. And a similar thing has happened here in the United States, because the non-Zionists are the non-Zionists are still not anti-Zionist, meaning they're not like, we don't want all the Jews to die. Yeah. Hey, Andre, how are things in down under?
Good. I was just in Mark's server, and he started getting angry at something that was being said, and then I heard your voice in the background. I'm like, "Oh, you're watching Jacob's stream? That's what you're disagreeing against." And I tuned in, and I'm like, "Yeah, I have to agree with Mark. Which rarely happens. So I came into that because the things being said.
I am going to shut off the stream in 15 minutes because I've been spending way too much time today streaming and I have to do stuff. But yeah, I'm just wondering, Guy, obviously you live in England. I've been to England once. There's a lot of English people who are involved in this little corner. There is a lot. I have been watching Carl Benjamin 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I was watching a lot of Carl Benjamin. I was watching him every day. He has been working to build a political presence in England for the past 10 years. He ran for European Parliament 8 years ago, was it?
Yeah, he ran for UKIP, I believe.
Yeah, 6 years ago or 8 years ago, something like that. And he has quietly been building a following. And if what we're seeing here from the United States is more accurate than what you're seeing, which the only reason I would say that is I see a lot of censorship in the UK, and I hear you. You don't see it, but I see a lot of censorship. I could see there being a huge surprise in the upcoming election, whenever you guys have your next elections. It's in a few years to come, isn't it? But you guys can have snap elections at any time, can't you?
We're not going to have a snap election. We've got the Labour Party have got such a vast majority. They don't need. They could just sit back for 5 years and wait, whatever happens. And the Tories are in disarray. UKIP, as I say, doesn't have a chance because of the system.
Yeah.
So basically, Labour Party is sitting pretty for at least a decade, probably.
You think for a decade?
It's right. They've got that would be in one more election. Yeah.
I don't see it.
They'd have to really badly misstep to have to. So one of the things about the previous Conservative group was that they dragged on because they didn't need to go to an election, so they didn't. They were struggling so badly in Parliament and in the country. They knew they were failing, but because they knew they were failing, they didn't want to go to the election, so they didn't. And Labour can do the same. They can wait it out. So, yeah, just like Trump's got 4 years. You know that.
Trump has 2 years. The midterm election is going to be, first of all, a second term president after the midterms. The last 2 years of a second term, it's called a lame duck presidency for a reason. He has no power. Seriously, no power, because anything he can do can be reversed.
It's true, but this situation is a little bit strange. The left is about as disorganized as we've ever seen it. They don't seem to have any meaningful leadership. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. But
it's about the midterms.
I usually agree with that, but I don't know. It feels a little bit different. There should be a tremendous amount of energy on the streets right now. I don't see it.
Yes. There is definitely disarray. So it is very rare for the president's party to make gains in the midterms. It almost never happens. The Republicans are so close to not having a majority that any normal election, and there's plenty of Democrats who are waiting on the I forget what they call it, but there's the thermostatic effect, I think they call it, which is there will be a switchback, and the Democrats think that in November 26, they are going to gain. All they need to gain is a few seats, that they will be back in power. The real question is, what happens in November 2026? And November 2026 is not that far away.
Well, Jacob, let me stretch this out a little bit further. Even if they do, I think that what's happened to the left, and you could try to reduce that down to just not being able to answer basic questions about sex, right? But that problem, should it continue to persist and they not reorganize and figure, the Silicon Valley is not going to come back behind them, right? The entire IT sector, basically, and all of the figureheads have now lined up right behind this new right thing, and they're probably not going anywhere anytime soon. So even if November 2026, they lose a couple of seats and it becomes more challenging, I have this feeling that we're dealing with an ascendant new right that's going to be in power for like 20 years. Maybe that I don't know, but that's it. There's signals of that.
There are signals that what was the old. I keep on talking about the dinosaurs not realizing the meteor hit. I see a lot of that in the United States. There's a lot of people who don't seem to realize they've lost power. And we will see what happens in 2026. There are a couple of possibilities. One of those possibilities is that the Democrats do win the election enough that they would get to dictate what happens. And in 2028, it'll probably be Vance. It may be against a Democrat like Pete Buttigieg, like Josh Shapiro, right? That's the normal money thinking. This is how we're going to go back to normal. I give that less than a 5% chance of actually happening. Another possibility is that in 2026, the Republicans, in a very similar to MAGA type election as we had in 2024, gain seats, don't factionalize, and J.D. Vance runs against a Democrat nobody cares in 2028, wins, and we get a kind of continuation. I give that a 30, maybe 40% chance. I think 50 to 60% chance what's going to happen is the Democratic Party is actually going to die. The Republicans are going to split into two large factions. There is going to be a stunning rebuke of the Democrats, which merely means that the Republicans will gain 20 seats, maybe at most, but in a midterm, Republicans gaining seats will be devastating to the Democrats, and there will be enough diversity within the Republican Party that the Republican Party is going to split.
Yeah. Do you ever see the map of like U.S. political parties, and like you see these times where, you know, one party just swarms the whole thing, like the Whigs, like everybody becomes Whigs, and the Whigs split out into two groups. We're in the middle of that. I think
that's what it seems like is happening to me.
Yeah.
MAGA and MAHA, Make America Great Again and Make America Healthy Again, seems to be a very natural split.
Yeah.
With Silicon Valley and the Democrats being on the MAHA side, right? And so I see California, for example, going MAHA very strongly. New York, New Jersey, going MAHA very strongly. All where we have the Indians, the Jews, the LGBT, and T will come back. We are in the middle of what I think is a realignment.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one way or another, the large coalition that Trump has built together, whether it's 4 months, 4 years, 20 years, whatever it is, like it's going to fracture at some point, right? And I think you're right about where those fault lines are.
Guy, you had thoughts?
It's interesting what you were saying, because the Federalist Party and the Whigs, yeah, they came and went and died and over the streets stretched. But actually, the political environment in the US is very, very difficult for a decade or two, maybe even 20 years after that split, because the natural status, it feels to me, of the American system is a two-party system.
Yeah, no. We are set up in a way that
with three, it's unstable, and it has to find two at some point. But the instability can last quite a while.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I think what we're seeing in the United States reminds me a lot of the fall of the Soviet Union. I see
Yes.
I see, and to some degree, when you look back to the fall of the Soviet Union, that was a huge shift in global politics. It was a huge shift in world history. Yet the other day we were asking about it, trying to remember what year it happened, and people were giving different years.
So I think that the Soviet monster evolved. It didn't die, right? And it took root in the U.S. education systems, especially, and produced multiple generations of folks. So now, yeah.
Sorry.
No, so we're just, this is like an echo of the fall of the Soviet Union in a lot of ways.
What was interesting to me is that there was I've been following the Institute for the Study of War, very useful channel to follow about Ukraine, and Major General Petraeus, American general, and they were saying that one of the things that Putin currently doing is that he's trying to take over all the veterans organizations in Russia again, bringing them back into the government fold. Because one of the problems they had was that people hadn't recognized was that one of the drivers of perestroika was actually the returning veterans from Afghanistan trying to tell truth to power, that Afghanistan had been a complete and utter disaster, and had damaged so many people. I remember meeting a veteran, not just of Afghanistan, but actually of the suppressing the Azerbaijani revolution as well. And the guy was just a complete and utter mess. I mean, he just, off his brain.
So this is one of the interesting divides that I see, right? Because we can identify a totalitarian, like individual at the top kind of problem within the Soviet Union, but that's not really what started it, right? There's the communist thing has less to do with a hierarchy that can come out of it than a weird like mental mind map that can change about how reality exists, right? And so when I'm like, what I watch happen in the US and what I was a part of until not that long ago was almost the exact line for line of what the Russians went through when the communist ideas spread, which is why Peterson's work was so influential on me, because it was basically like going through an exorcism from that perspective of reality into a totally different one.
I think the other thing that you've got to notice with the Soviet Union, are you going to finish this, Jacob?
No, I was going to say, I'm going to leave you guys talking and I'm going to go backstage. And if people want to join and stuff, they can. But I'm going to just let you guys talk.
Okay, thank you. I think the level of corruption underlying the system doesn't exist in the States in the same way, in any way, in any shape or form. Everything was totally corrupt. Everything was corrupted and corrupting in the Soviet Union.
But I think corruption in the US, I think, manifests a lot more in corporatism rather than other forms. So, you can visibly see that corruption in the USSR. In the US, it's more so like white collar corruption rather than like, if you see what I mean. Like,
I think it was white collar. It was professional corruption in the Soviet Union. Everything was so. We always said, so there were policemen every 50 meters along the road, and each one of them was buying their station off the sergeant, who was buying the road off the captain, who was eventually paying the minister.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to get buried, you had to pay someone something. The milk and everything else was so diluted because basically everyone took their cut along the way and just threw in some dirty dishwater to replace it. The whole thing was completely and utterly corrupt in ways that we can't even struggle to imagine.
It's like ideological reactionary corruption in a way.
Yeah, well, there was just everyone was taking a little bit of cut. They're taking the cuts because the system wasn't paying them enough.
Yeah.
Or wasn't giving them enough. Yeah. It was difficult. I was there in 91, 92 for 10 years after. So, yeah, I've seen it on the other side. It wasn't easy at all. Yeah. Sorry, those pictures on the other side. Those ones. I'll get the right side and see. Those ones are all us in Uzbekistan, in Soviet Union, in the old Soviet Union.
Oh,
It's supposed to independence. So, yeah,
So,
yeah. I think that going back to where I think the partisan states, I think that's a really interesting diagnostic. Do you agree with that, Michael? Do you think that's a fair way that the parties will, that the Republican Party will both take over and at the same time split?
Yeah, it's inevitable. I mean, any mass that grows that big inevitably is going to find themselves in some kind of discord, right? And you can see this happen in church history too.
Oh yeah.
And so that I think that's the best way to see this is like, instead of separating some kind of weird, like, oh well, here's a political set of things and it exists separate from the religious. No, guys, it's all the same, right? It's all one thing. It's just bodies. It's just bodies of things. And when a mass grows too big, generally there will be some kind of infighting and it will tear them apart. The only time a big mass can exist and not turn to infighting and this is what we're saying as Christians, like, the closer in alignment you are with the Logos, with Christ, is the only way you could maintain a large mass, right?
Yeah.
Or even long term.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or have an external threat.
Yeah, those will always come.
Which was what Putin has generated for himself.
Yeah. So I tend to, I could come up with plenty of grievances with Putin, but I don't see him the same way that I would have 10 years ago. And I see, like, that's not the same kind of totalitarianism that existed during the Soviet Empire. It doesn't look anything like that to me.
No, it isn't. It's different.
Right. And that imperialism, all of that Russian imperialism existed in tension to the Orthodox Church, right? It always had to. And so this is the two eagles on the flag. These are the two heads of the eagle, rather, right? So Putin should behave himself better in some areas, but it's also a little bit difficult to judge because of some of the misbehavior by American powers specifically. I don't think we've done right by them in more than a handful of areas. And like I said, we're certainly capable of being war criminals. Look at Iraq. So my great hope here, especially with Putin being as an astute person, someone who astutely studies history, that the role of the Orthodox Church is very important, and he has to be obedient to Christ rather than use the church for his own means. But I know that tension is there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to have to go. I've been called by she who must be obeyed.
I kind of have to bounce here too. It's very good speaking with you, though.
And you too. Thank you very much, and thank you to Jacob as well for letting us do this. Bye-bye, folks.
Okay, guys. Yeah.
I'm going to use host's prerogative to put the Reverend Parcells to bed because he does need to get up in the morning.
Sorry, Reverend. Thank you.
But before he goes, I have a question. Let's say, God forbid, that I were to burn somebody at the stake for not being a Trinitarian. And I did not repent of that. Is that a salvation issue?
Sometimes Jacob takes
There's a
that devil's
proverb.
advocate thing too
Isn't there a
far.
proverb that says something like "Don't answer a fool according to his folly."
But there's a proverb that says, answer a fool according to his folly.
There is.
Exactly right. And I'm going to leave it to you guys to determine, which of those was applicable in this situation as I go. So, but anyhow, good.
Thank you, Reverend.
Good to
Thank
chat
you.
with you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
The